reporting out this week that an ICE directive is really putting Florida's sunshine laws and open government transparency to the test. And so I'm pleased to bring in the author of this piece, who is joining us live now via Zoom. This is Monique Madden, an independent journalist and the founder of the Two Can Be True newsletter. Monique, we appreciate your time today. Thanks so much for joining us here on Fox 35 News Plus.
Thank you for having me.
So, Monique, interesting reporting. I know this is something you've been looking into for a while and investigating, and you got your hands on a memo that talks about how what ICE and how ICE wants local governments to handle requests about the immigration detention efforts. Talk to us about what you learned from that memo.
Right. So in this directive, ICE is telling all local law enforcement agencies, that includes police departments, sheriff's offices, jails that are participants of the 287G program, that ICE is in control of all local documents, records, statistics, and that they cannot be released without federal approval. Now, this memo is being, it puts ICE between the public and the records held by local police. So it's raising several questions.
Yeah, because here in Florida, we know those 287G agreements, are in place literally all across the state. And so this is a big impact, especially here in the Sunshine State.
Right. And it's significant because these are not just federal records. We're talking about local police, local agencies, officers, local police decisions, and ultimately local taxpayers. So, yes.
What does ICE say about why they need to take such a hard line on this, or why they believe this is information that should not be released?
Right. So if you take a look at the reporting, I actually published the actual directive. So you can take a look, the public can take a look themselves. But the important thing here is that ICE is actually not explaining themselves. They're not saying why. They actually did not respond to any request for a comment for this story. So I am interested in understanding why. That said, they are demanding that all local agencies in Florida and in Texas, and if not in other states already, that they do not speak to the media about this program.
How does this kind of bring, some tension to Florida's open government laws, the sunshine laws that are pretty broad in this state? So what this raises some interesting kind of legal questions here.
It does, and many experts are sounding the alarm. They are asking, well, is this going to be put to the test? It's clearly already being put to the test, but will it stand up in court if it ever gets there? And does it have legal grounds? I think that's a question that we will continue to explore as I continue to report.
I know you've also talked with a number of immigration attorneys and folks who have been impacted by these ICE raids. I know we've heard about the difficulties even in them getting some information that they are trying to get a hold of for their legal proceedings.
Right. So, I mean, the attorneys are telling me that this kind of secrecy deepens fear. Because families are already trying to understand what's happening during traffic stops, arrests, transfers to ICE custody. I reported not long ago that families are drafting wills because they're afraid to die in immigration custody or in, immigration enforcement. I do talk about that in the story.
And so what is the process then that ICE wants the release of information to go through according to this directive, and how is that kind of different from the way things would work for a normal kind of local case, just for folks who may not be familiar with this process?
Right. So for folks who think this doesn't apply to them because they're not members of the media, they're very wrong. This really does impact the public. So the way that it works, the pipeline would be the journalist requests information from their media department, their public information or public affairs department, and they would submit what we call an official records request. Now, by Florida law, there are certain standards, certain timeframes, certain provisions that we have to adhere to, and then there's a certain amount of time that they have to respond to these requests. Now, usually when it has to do with police records, for example, I'll just put one example out there. How many officers have been trained or have been certified by ICE to conduct immigration enforcement on the streets, on the local neighborhoods? They used to be able to answer that. They used to be able to say, you know what, Monique, we have 6 officers that were certified this week, and then just release that information. But now there's somewhat of a longer process where ICE needs to clear that information. So that police department would have to forward it to DHS, and they would have to give it the green light. Now, in one case, in one instance, they actually responded saying, we will not be answering questions by the media because of the partial government shutdown. So that is also really interesting because there is a lot of money flowing into the expansion of these programs across the country, but that seems to not be applicable to the answering of the questions about such programs. So, there is an opacity here.
And do we know how these agencies who have received this memo are handling this?
Right. It's already affecting some police departments. And of course, I have placed requests in there to understand how more and more agencies are handling this. But in one case, in one example, there's a small town that the city attorney said, we seem to have cover. When in doubt, give me a call, but do not respond to any public records requests. Do not answer any emails. Just acknowledge receipt. And we have to send this to ICE. We have to send this to DHS because this is what we're being told to do. So it's really putting these municipalities, these departments in between the federal government and local public records laws.
So what happens next?
That's a good question. I will continue reporting on this, but I think that this has raised alarms for press freedom, First Amendment rights, and transparency into this program that is rapidly expanding. In one instance, we have one police department down here in South Florida that increased its immigration certified officers by more than 800% in less than a few months. So we know that it's growing rapidly. Now we need the public's help to better investigate this. If you have any information, any tips, if you want to come forward confidentially, as journalists, we're always here to see how we can better investigate these processes, even when there are bigger hurdles.
Well, Monique Madden, founder of the Two Can Be True newsletter, we appreciate you joining us here on Fox 35 News Plus today and sharing your reporting with us.
Thank you so much. And I just want to say thank you to the Florida Trib who partnered with me on this investigation.
Yeah, where can folks learn more?
Yes, they can go to thefloridatrib.org or they can go to my website, moniqueomadden.com/2canbetrue.
All right, Monique, we appreciate your time.